In my household, if you were to ask the boys and my wife, our tooth fairy was irresponsible, lazy, and cheap. That would be their words about our tooth fairy. Our tooth fairy took it to heart and decided when Savannah was born that our tooth fairy would be epic and be the greatest tooth fairy ever. And so when Savannah lost her first tooth, I was on it, man, that right under the pillow. Boom, in the morning she came out. She's so excited. She's waving a $20 bill, right? And the boys are like, "Are you kidding me? I got a quarter. That was like a year ago." I'm like, "Be better." And so she lost her second tooth, came out again with another $20 bill. They're like, "This is just crazy," right? Well, she lost her third tooth, and I went under the pillow. It wasn't under the pillow, right? And so the next night, same thing. I checked under the pillow. And then come to find out, our tooth fairy has a very short attention span. And so I forgot all about the tooth, right? And so now, fast forward 5 days later, it's Sunday morning. I'm getting ready for church. And I'm in the bathroom there. And all of a sudden I hear the door knock. And Savvy comes in. And Savannah, right? She's like 5 or 6. She's broken. She is crying in that cry that she has been hurt to her core. And she's like, "The tooth fairy doesn't like me, hasn't come all week long, won't leave any money." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, our tooth fairy forgot," right? And so as Holly is consoling her, I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, I got to come up with something. And I had just an epic idea. This is a great idea. I felt like it was from God. I grabbed my cell phone, put it up to my ear. I came out, and I was like, "All right, bye." And I went, and I looked at the two, most important women in my life. I said, "Hey, I just got off the phone with the tooth fairy, and the tooth fairy was super busy, but the tooth fairy's coming tonight and going to really make it up to you. It's going to be epic." And then I'm looking at these two women, right, as they're looking back at me, and Holly goes, "The tooth fairy doesn't have a phone." So I'm looking at her because we've been parenting for 2 decades together. We've been seen to be on the same side all 2 decades, working together on this. And my perception, you tell me if I'm wrong, is that she's calling me a liar about the tooth fairy and what the tooth fairy has and does not have. So I continued to look at her for a moment, and then I said, "Okay, I just want to just kind of make sure that I'm hearing what you're saying. What you're saying, love of my life, is that the magical tooth fairy, the tooth fairy that is able somehow to go around to thousands and thousands of houses in a single night, that tooth fairy, the same tooth fairy that magically seems to be able to leave money underneath every kid's pillow, though the tooth fairy has no source of income, this magical being, this fairy, I'm stretching the truth too far for our daughter in saying that the tooth fairy swung by T-Mobile over the weekend and got a small data plan and gave me a phone call. I'm out of bounds here. This is, how would a kid ever believe that could ever happen? And Savannah looked at me, she goes, "Dad, the tooth fairy doesn't have a cell phone." I said, "Really?" Because the tooth fairy just texted me and said, "I quit." So yeah, the tooth fairy has a cell phone. Tooth fairy's out. We're done. We got to grow in our thinking. It's not about my truth. It's about God's truth. And I don't want us to be a church that says, "Well, my truth and my truth." There's the truth. And the truth, right, is the way. It leads to great life. It's a light unto my path. It gets on the inside of me, and it changes those things that are out of whack.